Olivia had an obsession when it came to mirrors. She loved to watch her reflection. She would call it self-love, but her relatives and friends would tease her that she is self-absorbed sometimes. Her life felt empty somehow when she didn't have a handheld mirror next to her. She wanted to always look and feel perfect. This time she was looking for an original type of mirror, something unique that stood out. Her eyes darted at an antique shop in the corner of a small street. It was easy to miss. Hidden in the shadows of two tall buildings, it was a place that felt out of time. The moment she looked into the shop, she found a mirror that was different, but she felt like something inside was looking back. She dismissed her feelings because she tends to overthink a lot when it wasn't necessary. The air inside clung to the scent of dust, old wood, and something else. Something nameless. The kind of place that had secrets. Things you wouldn't notice unless you looked carefully. Olivia had passed this street before, but today, something made her stop. It was probably because she was too obsessed with mirrors. However, this wasn't a shop that usually sold mirrors. It wasn't like her to go into strange shops, but the mirror called to her. She wasn't sure if she even made the right choice to walk inside. It was as if the shop had pulled her in. The bell above the door rang faintly as Olivia entered. She glanced around the dimly lit room. Old-fashioned lamps cast soft pools of golden light across the shelves cluttered with strange old things, relics from forgotten times. Some of the items were elegant, others strange, but they all whispered of lives that had once cherished them. The air was thick with history. Then, Olivia's eyes darted to that mirror she had seen before walking in. At the far end of the room stood that mirror. Not just any mirror, but an old, tall one framed in silver. Its delicate engravings curled like vines, intricate and beautiful, almost mesmerizing. Not a handheld mirror like she wanted, but still very unique. She couldn't ignore it. The silver shone in the dim light, catching her attention immediately. It demanded her focus, yet in a way that didn't feel forceful. But there was something positively wrong with it. The glass wasn't aged like the others in the shop. No dullness, no cloudiness, just perfect. Almost too perfect, as if it had just been made. But there was something else. Darkness, a deep shadow beneath the glass that felt unnatural. It was as if the mirror was holding something inside it, something it wasn't supposed to. Olivia stepped closer, drawn to it despite being anxious herself. The carvings around the frame shifted just a little as though they were alive, moving just out of the corner of her eye. She blinked, and they were still again. The air in the shop grew still, and the faint sounds of the street outside seemed to fade. Her own reflection stared back at her. It was her. Of course it was. But there was something about her eyes. They were hers, but not quite. They seemed deeper, darker, holding something, waiting. Her reflection tilted its head as she did, but there was a slight delay, a fraction of a second that made her breath catch in her chest. She frowned. It was just a trick of the light, just her imagination. Then, the whisper. It was soft, so faint she might have imagined it, a breath against her ear. "Take me home." Her skin prickled. She jerked her head around, half expecting to see someone standing behind her. But the shop was empty, except for the old man behind the counter. He sat motionless as if time had stopped for him. His face was unreadable, and his eyes were distant, as though he hadn't moved in years. She turned back to the mirror. Her own reflection was staring at her, waiting. The whisper came again, this time louder, clearer. "Take me home." Something in her chest tightened. She didn't understand why, but her hand moved to her coat pocket. Without thinking, she pulled out her wallet. Her fingers trembled as she opened it and pulled out cash. She didn't know why. She wasn't sure what had come over her. All she knew was that she couldn't leave without the mirror. The delivery truck arrived just as the sky darkened, heavy clouds rolling in. By the time the mirror was placed in her hallway, the world outside had grown cold, and the first drops of rain began to fall. It stood there in her home as though it had always belonged, as though the hallway had been waiting for it. But as soon as the mirror was in place, something changed. The house felt different. Olivia couldn't pinpoint it, not at first. It wasn't the temperature or the lighting, but the silence in the house felt thicker, more oppressive. The air was heavier, and the warmth she had always loved seemed to fade, replaced by a chill that settled deep in her bones. She told herself it was nothing, just the exhaustion of the day. But small things started happening. The hallway near the mirror was always colder than the rest of the house, no matter how high she turned the heat. She would walk by, and for a brief moment something would brush against her arm, but when she looked, nothing was there. Not a gust of wind, not a draft, just the feeling of something brushing against her. Then there was the reflection. It should have been simple. It should have just reflected her, nothing more. But every time she looked into the mirror, she felt something else. Something watching her. Her movements felt delayed, just a fraction of a second behind, as if the reflection was studying her, copying her with a lag. It was unsettling. It made her stomach twist. One evening, when the shadows were deepening and the house was quiet, she saw something she couldn't explain. In the reflection behind her, there was something. A shape. Just a shadow at first, a darker presence where the hallway should have ended. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She told herself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, a shadow playing tricks on her tired mind. But the feeling in her chest grew cold, and deep inside, she knew. She wasn't alone. The reflection wasn't just showing her. It was hiding something else, something dark. Something was inside the glass. The first whisper came late that night. Olivia awoke suddenly as if someone had pulled her from sleep. The room was dark and silent. She lay there, listening to the night. And then the whisper. Olivia. Her blood froze. The voice wasn't outside the house. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't even the street outside. It was in the hallway. The whisper was coming from beyond her bedroom door. Her breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding as she lay still, barely moving, waiting. And then, the whisper came again. Help me. It was so close now. Her chest tightened, her mind screaming for her to move, to run. But she couldn't. She just lay there, terrified, listening. The silence in the room thickened, pressing in on her like invisible hands. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy. Each step creaked on the floorboards, making her heart race. They were moving closer, closer to her bedroom door. She squeezed her eyes shut, holding her breath, praying it would stop. The door creaked. Olivia's eyes shot open. Nothing. The hallway outside was dark and empty, just the mirror. The glass shimmered faintly as though something was moving inside it. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She wanted to look away. She didn't want to see. But she couldn't stop herself. And then, in the reflection, she saw it. A face. It was behind her own. Not hers. Someone else's. Watching her. Grinning. Her blood ran cold. She wanted to scream, to run, but her voice was caught in her throat. She couldn't move. She was frozen. The reflection, it was smiling at her. Not her smile. A dark, twisted grin, a mouth stretched too wide. It was something else. Her mind screamed that it wasn't real, that it was just the mirror playing tricks, but deep inside she knew. It wasn't the glass. It was the thing behind it. The thing that was slowly crawling through the surface, inch by inch, reaching for her. She should have destroyed the mirror, should have shattered it into pieces, burned it, thrown it out. But she couldn't. She knew she couldn't. The mirror wouldn't let her. It was more than just a reflection. It was something else. The cracks started slowly. At first, they were small, faint lines that appeared with no warning. A jagged fracture here, a thin line there. But the whispers grew louder, more urgent, more desperate. "Help me," they whispered. And one night, the whisper wasn't just in the glass anymore. It was in the room. The mirror cracked again, and again. The glass began to fall away piece by piece until there was nothing left but the darkness inside. And from that darkness, something stepped out. Olivia didn't have time to scream. She didn't have time to run. The last thing she saw was her reflection, still grinning, staring down at her. It raised one pale, lifeless hand, and it waved. Goodbye. Somewhere deep in the glass, Olivia's mouth opened in a silent scream. But in the real world, in the hallway, her reflection, her own reflection, slowly smiled. The house is quiet now. The mirror is whole again, a perfect, untouched surface. And when someone new walks by, it will be waiting for them to stop, to listen, to hear the whisper, and to take it home.